Dear friends, before we watch the episode with Andrew, I would like to invite you to follow and subscribe to Audio Products Podcast. You can do it on YouTube, but also on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and any other platform of your choice. You can also give a small donation to the project by going to the Buy Me a Coffee page linked in the description of this episode. It will help us to bring amazing guests like Andrew, but also to visit companies so we can learn how they build audio products we all love. Thank you so much, and now let's go to the episode. Welcome to Audio Products Podcast. We are meeting with pro audio industry veterans, founders, product managers, UX designers, to learn how they build and manage the products we all love. You will get tips how to navigate your career in audio and how to develop a successful audio product. From musical instruments through audio plugins and gaming middleware up to music distribution platforms or consumer electronics like headphones, mics, and even automotive speaker systems. Enjoy. Hey, Andrew.
Hello.
Thank you for joining the show. I'm super
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
super pleased that you could make it.
Yeah.
There's so many things I would like to to ask you, but as I'm not a mix engineer, so they will hopefully be a little bit different than like usual questions that you get.
Great.
Yeah. So maybe for like everybody listening, I mean, Andrew, you don't need introductions, right? Probably I don't have to talk about your career, but I mean, I'm super happy because you're also like a building, not only like a mixing, but building your own software products, right? Recently.
Yeah, I've built some in collaboration with other companies, and then I've since lockdown, basically, I've taught myself to code, and using SoundFlow, I've built a bunch of apps. So yeah.
So I mean, did you build them just like I watched some of these interviews? I remember that it was during the lockdown, but was it like out of boredom, or I don't know, you needed something to do, or this is
I
really
think anybody who, well, certainly anybody who works on records, you're using one gigantic piece of software, and in my case, it's ProTools, and I use it all day, every day.
Mm-hmm.
And there are always things about the way you use it which you wish you could automate on the lowest end of the scale. And then there are things you just sort of wish that it did. So some of the apps I've done are really simple, but they're just things that make my life so much easier. And there's one, for people who use Pro Tools, they'll definitely know what I'm talking about. The timeline in the Pro Tools session, you can make it start at any time code number you want. You can make it start at any bar you want. But with minutes and seconds, it always starts at 0. So if you're doing a mix and the mix is somewhere down the session, like 8 minutes and 38 seconds into the session, you do a mix, you send it to the band, and they send you an email back that says, hey, so could you turn up the tambourine at 1 minute and 15? So that's 1 minute 15 plus 8 minutes and 38 or whatever it was I said. And you end up doing selections from the beginning of the session and trying to figure out exactly where it is. And so I wrote an app that just reads the counter out of Pro Tools, and you can zero it anywhere in the timeline. And then you can locate. That's all it does, is it just changes the display of the counter, and you can locate with local time instead of session time. So it's not that big a deal, but it is life-changing when you've got a page of notes and they've all got times on them. So that's why I got into it, because I had some really simple things I wanted to do. And once I realized that the SoundFlow platform would let me start doing things that were more complicated, it's all I did was learn JavaScript and learn how that works inside of SoundFlow. And I got a lot of help from SoundFlow itself. Super cool. The forum community for SoundFlow is great. So if you're not a total geek and you don't already know how to code, you can still jump in and start automating things almost immediately. It's a really, really great platform for that.
So how did you come across SoundFlow and Christian?
Well, the real thing is that the way every single session I do is set up is my mixes are printed on the bottom audio track. So at the very bottom of the session, I have a stereo audio track, and I have the rough mix on that track until I print my first mix. And then my mix goes through that track. So when the track is an input, I hear my mix. When the track is not an input, I hear whatever the reference is, whether it's the rough mix or my previous mix or whatever. So to switch input on that track, you have to have it on the screen because you have to click the input button. There is no controller smaller than, I mean, the S6 might have it, but I wasn't going to spend $50,000 to have an input button on a track that wasn't on the screen. And I was talking to somebody about it for the 50th time in the last 10 years. And someone said, well, you should definitely check out SoundFlow. And with the forums, within the first 10 minutes I had SoundFlow, I had it working, where I have a function key on my keyboard that swaps input on the bottommost track in the session.
Boom.
Done. And what it did, I mean, obviously it's a problem I've been trying to solve forever, but it was obvious that SoundFlow talked to Pro Tools in a much deeper level than anything else. Quick Keys, which is long gone, even Keyboard Maestro, which you can do quite a bit in, it doesn't talk to Pro Tools in the same way at all. And it certainly can't talk to stuff that isn't showing on the screen. And so that was the light bulb, big time.
Gotcha. So you're saying, I understand that you're saying that there is a lot of this tedious and sort of, I mean, I know this too, right? I mean, I'm just record a little bit, not to the, it's not like huge sessions, but I understand you're saying there's still a lot of, the small things that, I mean, technically small, but for productivity, they're just extremely.
Yeah. I'm trying something. And first of all, it's hundreds of times a day, hundreds, literally. I'm not exaggerating at all. But the main thing was, if I'm doing little edits and I want to hear how that compares, I have to scroll all the way to the bottom of the session, flip input, and then find where I was to scroll back up and actually tweak the thing, and then scroll down to hear it. It's just a nightmare. So I started having the mixer window really small on a second monitor, but still I have to mouse over and look. Whereas now I'm just keep doing what I'm doing, and I hit F19, which is all the way in the upper right of the keyboard, right next to the trackball. I never have to look at it. Perfect. It's such a tiny thing, but it made such a difference. It really made mixing more fun immediately.
Okay, but do you see other, small things that still could be improved? Some spaces for for new products and some kind of productivity issues.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is that sometimes you're doing things for yourself. And I'm not the only person who mixes through an audio track, but, I don't know how many people do it. And I don't know how many people need it to flip input on the fly. But you find things, especially while mixing, stuff is changing all the time. So it's hard to know exactly what you're going to want to do next. But there are things that you do repetitively, and especially during session prep, and everybody preps sessions differently. So it's hard to generalize again, but every once in a while you find something like the offset counter, being able to zero the counter, where that's a pain point, I thought, just for music people. And then it turns out for post as well, because you can zero the timecode counter. So if you've got a super session and you're working on reel 7, that's at 7 hours, but you've got notes based on it starting at 1 hour. So it comes up all over the place. So that is a relatively small thing, but is useful for everybody. So it's more, whenever the thing I'm solving turns out to be something that other people can use, then I do it properly and make it available. And there are a couple of things which are paid, and most things are free that I put out there. Okay, here's an example. You wanted to tune vocals in Melodyne. Well, now it's ARA. So it's no big deal. But previously, you had to transfer the audio. And if you had 12 tracks of background vocals, transferring the audio in all of them, you had to arm all the plugins. And then in real time, you'd hit play, and then it was done. And then when you wanted to bounce them, how are you going to do that? And so I just wrote scripts to do that stuff easily. And it's just a life changer for people, because you get to the point where you think, I really should tweak the tuning on these background vocals, but I don't want to, because it sucks so much to set it up and then to print them that, no, I think it's okay. And you don't have the conversation out loud, because if you did, you'd say, well, no, I actually have to do it. But then it almost becomes fun to watch the thing that used to suck happen without you doing anything. And it makes you more likely to at least consider doing all of the stuff that has these real pain points that are just the technical side. It's not, I don't want it to tune the vocals for me, but I want it to be ready to tune. So, yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, but it's actually, you're just like I think it's actually nice takeaway, so there is like so much, I mean, for product people, right? People who build products, right? Like I look for those small productivity improvements, or big platforms like ProTools and other, I think, all their DAWs, they have, they cannot just like do everything, and it's just, so there's actually so much space to build, I'm saying this because one of the questions I have to you was actually, that the market is so saturated. There is so many, plugins and, even hardware tools, so is there really like a space, to build new products at all? I mean, especially that, like you say, it's, like a tools won't solve creative problems, right? I mean, or I don't know, maybe they can, but they're just not like they're just not a solution for everything, right? I mean, sometimes I think companies sort of, because they sell products, so they have to say, oh, it's just like this is how you can become be creative or something. So that was always like, on one hand, working on the product teams and building products is so cool. But then I sort of have this doubt, is there still space, to build, I don't know, new plugins,
I think so. I mean, there's always space for it, but I think that it's just trying to be smart about it. Like, there are 30 or 40 1176 plugins, and they all look like 1176s. And you'll find one that you like, and that's fine. And it's a great compressor. I mean, it's the thing I grew up with, so I use 1176s all the time. But it's not like you're really going to prove that yours is so much better than someone else's. Like, it's not, that doesn't make sense to me at this point. We are absolutely saturated with 1176 plugins. Okay, I think that's done. But if you can package an 1176 and something that doesn't look anything like an 1176, and you change the, on the technical side, the interface, but really the creative interface, so that instead of it being setting attack and release and input gain, you're setting melons and elephants. Like, there's a company, Safari Pedals, which I think are brilliant at packaging stuff in a way that's super fun. Even if they're saying like, oh, it is this exact thing, and here are the controls you would expect to get. It's got a name that has an animal in it. It has great artwork. They're all laid out like guitar pedals for the most part. And so you want to, it's almost like you really want this plugin to be awesome. Therefore, it is. And you experiment longer than you would maybe, and you find what you like about it. And I think that is where the innovation is, between the code you've written and the user. I mean, and that's super obvious to say it, but I think sometimes people lose sight of it. They assume that the interface people want for a FET compressor is an 1176 set of knobs.
Yeah. No, I'm actually the founder of Safari Pedals, was on this show like earlier. So, I had a chance to talk to him about his like a creative process, how he come up with this, cool plugins. But I agree, they're just like, they are awesome. And I mean, I think people love, simply beautiful things as well, so it's not about how they sound, but I mean, having some cool interfaces. I always love native instruments, how amazing like a virtual
Absolutely.
instruments they can do. It's just it's just so fun to play with.
And obviously, if they didn't sound good, then who cares what they look like? Like, you'll be found out very, very quickly. But I think it's the parallel to working on records is your ability to use the software is a given. It, like, obviously the DSP underneath is good. Of course it sounds great, because otherwise why would you be trying to sell it? So the point is the interface with the person using it, or your personality in a room if you're recording vocals, or that's what's really important, and that's what's really different as you go between the companies. And I think that there was this huge explosion of modeling analog gear, and the two different ways where you're actually measuring individual bits on a circuit board. Well, it used to be big blocks on a circuit board, and it's just gotten more and more granular. And then there's the way to do it where you've got a library of, here are 25 different types of resistors, and here's a value. And so you don't measure it yourself, but you build a circuit. But at this point, a lot of the pieces of gear that, when I talk to people, like, oh yeah, I really miss this thing, it's weird digital stuff. It's like early digital stuff. There's stuff on the H3000 that is not out there yet because they haven't, ported the algorithms or whatever. Mm-hmm. I think analog, we've gotten pretty close to doing it all. And also, I think that we've reached the time when the ages of the people coming into the industry, they don't care about analog gear. It's not that you should or shouldn't, but they don't as much. So you don't have people like wishing for the old analog days. And I have lots and lots of thoughts about that, which we won't go into. But definitely, analog is not better than digital. It's different. End of story. They're just different. And that's fine. So, but if you want analog stuff, I think we're pretty good on that. So it's about the creativity. When I go to ADC, which is one of my favorite things in the world, Audio Developer Conference, I'm always the grumpy old man, because people are like, yes, this. I'm like, well, okay, but why? Or what am I supposed to do with it? Like, it's an amazing idea, but how do you get it out into the world where people are going to be super excited about it? So, whatever. It's one theme, and I just keep going over and over it. But I do think the people that get it right, it's extraordinary, and it's so much fun when they do.
You touched on so many actually points that I don't even know which question to ask first. But you mentioned, the new generation. I mean, I'm that kind of person that also, I didn't work with tape. So, I came, did my first recording, and, already with some first digital tools. And so I'm probably some kind of, how to say, like a middle generation. But I always wonder, how to say that. I can see that people actually demand a little bit different UX, UI, in sort of usability from the tools. On the other hand, they still need to, do the job, there must be some proper DSP underneath. So, even if you look all the modern, DAWs, they become such monsters, a huge, factories of functionalities. Yeah. And I always wonder, maybe that's another question. Do people actually know them all? Because to me, it's just what I'm trying to say, that I understand a little bit, let's say older generation, but I also can somehow relate, to younger folks who say, hey, I don't really care, has to be, a timeline, record, play, maybe insert for plugins, and that's all, I don't need all this, this actually prevents me from doing the preventing job, right?
Well, there are a lot of records being done in GarageBand, which is exactly that. You record, you mix it, you're done, and it's on your phone. And I think, but also, if you look at the DAWs, they're all in some way based on an old school mixing console and a visual representation of tape. And Ableton changed that completely, and then realized, well, we also need to have the edit window that's kind of like tape. Now, they've managed to avoid the mixing console in the same way that a lot of the DAWs do it. But it's also, for the way music is constructed in general, that stuff makes sense. And it didn't develop that way because of limitations in what you could do with analog gear, it developed that way because it made sense. You know, the fader happened when there were so many tracks that having them all on big knobs didn't make sense anymore, because you'd have to put your arm on the top and turn them up and turn them down. And okay, so now let's have faders that are right next to each other and they're small. Now let's have VCAs that can control more than one fader at a time. Most of it is to solve problems that people who are trying to be creative have. And like, okay, what if we did it like this? So it's understandable to me that all the DAWs look like tape machines and consoles, but at the same time, for pure composition, that's when, like, if you never leave your iPad, that's when stuff is super cool and completely different. But as soon as you try and make it so you can make a record, I think that's when you have to kind of fall back to that. And that's going to be exactly the same about the UIs for normal gear, compressors and EQs and things like that. At some point, it needs to be something where people know how to use it, but you make it fun and you call it something else and you help them out. So, yeah, I don't know. I just went in a big circle on that, but yeah.
Yeah, but I understand what, I mean, that you are saying that, how to say, that this is not necessarily a bad thing, that there are these new ways actually are emerging, and they're actually that good that people don't have, you know, younger generation doesn't have this, how to say, maybe formatted minds that they think of in terms of the analog gear and tapes and, you know, so they can actually create things that actually work for them. And that's actually, that's it.
And I think it's also that when you shrink what it is that something is supposed to do, now you can be super creative in the interface and how to make it do it. But once you get to the size of a DAW, it needs to do a lot of different stuff. And therefore, this paradigm of tape machine mixer just works really, really well. It's really easy. And even for people who've never worked on a traditional analog setup that's based on that, it makes sense. So I understand why they're all like that. And I would hate it if Pro Tools didn't look the way it did, because that's what I use and I need it to be what it is and it makes sense to me. And I do think it makes sense to people who've never used the real thing. But when you get into smaller things like music creation apps on the iPad and plugins, now you do not need, you're sandboxed inside of the DAW. You know, you're a pop-up floating window. You're not the whole process. So I feel like you've got a lot more freedom.
Gotcha. You know, maybe a funny question, but I mean, you know, you grew up with Pro Tools, and I know that actually you mentioned on one of the interviews that knowing tools was one of your advantages, right? That helped you to get into the big sessions. But, you know, I'm not sure if this is not like a stupid question, but do you know all functionalities of Pro Tools? You know, I mean, it just grows so quickly. I mean, just so much of it inside of it, you know, it's just like how much of it, you see, I'm just like asking this question because again, we're just talking about this UX and, you know, usability and how tools sometimes get overcomplicated. And I was just wondering, you know, from somebody who's really like a power user, what's your perspective on, you know, this kind of feature factory? There is so much of it.
Well, I think that there are two sides to that. One is, for me, I'm still finding out about stuff. I'm really lucky that there's a group of us who are all really long-time power users, and we talk regularly. And someone will say, man, how come we can't do this? And someone say, oh, you can, just do that. And like, what? And no idea it exists. And it could be something as tiny as resizing a dialogue that I thought you couldn't, or some like really specific workflow thing that I've been working around. And it turns out, well, no, that's built in. But the flip side of that is discovery. So for new users, can they just install it, open it up, and work? And I think one of the things that Avid's been really good about lately is realizing they need to have a good tutorial system. And so I think the onboarding part of all of these DAWs that's the magic bullet. You know, if you make it so people can open it up and do what they want to do, whatever that is, relatively quickly, then they're willing to put in the time to learn all this stuff. But if they can't get any gratification right away, they just stop and go use something else.
Yeah, absolutely, you're right. And especially with the latest update of SoundFlow, that you already mentioned, it's actually the 2025.6. It was actually pretty cool. All these like tutorials and that's a big change. True. So how long have you been using Pro Tools? For how many years? If you just like
I'm trying to think. I started beta testing Pro Tools when the new builds came on floppy disks, and they would mail them to you. So I've been using it since 96, probably, maybe 97. Yeah, a long time. Coming up on 30 years.
And did you ever try like other DAWs? Not to like a change, but
well,
I mean, just like out of curiosity.
I started on the Synclavier, which was a full-on, did everything. I mean, you should just put a link and people can go check it out. Yeah. But they introduced disc recording. There was no mixer. It was purely just recording and editing. And so I was really good at that.
I remember.
Because I worked for the company for a while, and then I was freelance as an operator. Mm-hmm. And then when I saw Pro Tools, it was still Sound Designer, and it was cool, but it was very slow and clunky compared to the direct-to-disc, which costs, 100 times what Sound Designer costs. But I got a demo of TDM in 90, it's got to be 95.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 1994 or 95. And that's when I realized, like, okay, this is what's coming. And they actually lent me a system to use on a record I was doing. And unfortunately, after about a day, it just wouldn't boot up anymore. And I didn't have time to do anything. So I used it for a day. But when I realized what was going on with the TDM and the mixing and the signal processing and the routing, it's like, okay, that's it. The recording side of the Synclavier has just been eclipsed, and it's happening on a Mac 2 instead of on a 26 space mainframe computer.
Cool. Andrew, so you already touched Synclavier, and I remember like reading some of your interviews that it's actually this job and these skills actually, and being technician in Synclavier sort of got you into this, like a big session, sort of like help you to accelerate, your engineering career. So if we would like to translate this into like a, today, what would you advise? What are the like stuff that people should learn, except of course not for not being a dick and
ear, don't be a dick. That is definitely rule number one. I think that it's a little harder now because so many people know how to use all the stuff. Whereas back then, those tools weren't available to that many people. And there weren't that many people who were really proficient on the Synclavier or the Fairlight and those instruments. But that is definitely the first thing. It's really easy to learn the software to make it do the stuff that you do. You'll just, like you were talking about, you'll just find the features that you know. Mm-hmm. But if you want to work with other people, you need to go into it at least recognizing what somebody's doing if they use it in a completely different way to you. You can't be like, wait, what's that window? And it turns out it's the arrange window, So I think really learning the software you're using is a big deal. It's not in the same way as when I was coming up, though. I think now, in a way, because anybody can make a record on their laptop, it's more about getting out there and meeting people and trying to get the personal relationships and finding people to work with. It's finding ways to collaborate, because you can do it now practically for free. Any laptop now will run a DAW, and you can get audio interfaces super cheap. There are a lot of great cheap microphones. You can show up anywhere in the world and make a record on batteries. So now it's less a matter of trying to get in the door to watch the people doing stuff. It's actually just do stuff. Find a way to do what it is that you want to do, because the tools are available. So know the tools inside out, and then find ways to actually spend time doing it.
So actually you touched also like another thing I wanted to ask you, because I don't know, I haven't been into like a large sessions, with major labels. So, But I imagine that right now everything got a little bit, so there is more like a small studios and the independent artists, etc. So, and the budgets are smaller. So, so how can engineers, sort of like learn the craft if you can't go to the, to the studio and watch,
Well, there are
somebody's shoulder?
a million videos on YouTube just about snare drum sounds. I think that it is hard because most people will not have a chance to go work at a studio and watch bigger sessions happen.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't necessarily need to ever do a big session to have a really successful career making records. So one is that it does take talent. People feel like, well, if I learn the software and I can hang out. I mean, there definitely is talent involved. It's sort of musical intuition when you're working with a guitar player to know like which bits of it you should punch in maybe because that'll make it easier to play. And you don't have to be a guitar player to know that. You just have to be really aware of what's going on. And that's super important. But it's really about knowing your tools inside out because there isn't much money and you're going to be working in not pristine circumstances, you need to be able to do guerrilla recording, show up anywhere with a laptop and a couple microphones and get something cool and listen to what you're getting to understand what the possibilities are and make it work instead of always be thinking, well, if I had a couple of Neves and I was in a better room, this album would be amazing. Like, well, there's a way to make it amazing no matter where you are. And that's always been the case, but it's even more the case now. So for learning, I do think that watching videos can be great, but also it's super dangerous because there's so many people who state opinions as fact. That's my least favorite thing in the world that humans do, is to state an opinion as fact. There are very few facts once you're outside of the realm of writing software or designing DSP or hardware. It's all opinions based on what you hear and what you do. So a lot of the really good material is behind paywalls. And I know that's a real drag for people who are starting out, and it's not the cheapest thing in the world, but you can pretty much trust, like Mix with the Masters and Pure Mix. They've been around for a really long time. You've got not only people who've been in the industry for a long time making the videos, being in the videos, but the team behind them has been doing this for a long time. So not only are they experienced at what it is to make records, so they have some idea of how to curate it, but they're experienced at creating content for people to learn. And that is a big talent that's really, really difficult. So I think it's worth it. There are a lot of online schools, you can do classes at Berkeley online and things like that. And I think unless you want to just go in and do it seat of the pants, there are ways to learn in a more formal environment than just checking out YouTube, because you've got to be able to filter what you're seeing if you're just going all over the internet.
And there is so much of it that, you can actually, it's very hard actually to even differentiate, right? And actually pick things that are valuable when you are starting out.
Yeah. And I think it's really important to almost consciously change the language of a video you're watching to turn it into opinions. Because then you can decide whether you agree or not. But if you really don't know anything about a particular subject and you watch a video with somebody who's well-spoken and says this is the way it is, well, you're going to believe them. You never should believe anybody because there's no right way to do anything sonically or musically. So what you're trying to do is expand your toolkit so that when you're in the thick of it, you can go, oh man, there was that thing. Let me try that. And that'll be the thing that opens a door creatively for you to now figure out what it is that you want to do. So it's super useful, but you've got to be smart about not just believing stuff because some dude with a beard said it,
Yeah. Listen, I'm not sure if somebody asked you that question, but I just wonder, how, again, what's your perspective on it? Like growing your intuition and, something that people, call good ear. I'm just looking more like a, I think I can, I can have a good hearing for making melodies and music. I mean, I know there is talent part of it, but I always was a little bit deaf. Some people even who were, recorded a small EP said, hey, you actually, you can't even hear, the specific, things, those, tools do, right? Compression, etc. I mean, it maybe changed a little bit, but I just wonder how, a beginner could start and, sort of like a practice, like listening and what specific, tools do, right? And how you can sort of like grow your, I don't know, a specific style or, because I understand it's subjective, right? You do what you feel it's, or like how to say it, what bands like, but also like what you feel it's it's some kind of your own characteristic, right? And your own style.
Yeah. I mean, the way I describe what I do is I'm solving creative problems with technical tools because it's all we have is math or physics if you're recording. So that's all there is. But you're doing it because you don't like the way something is grooving or you don't like the way the bass and the kick drum are going to, like whatever it is, it's a creative issue. And again, you've got to educate yourself. Like if you want to be able to listen to something and understand compression, there's a video on Pure Mix that Fab Dupont did, how to listen to compression. And it's not here's how to compress things. He's never going to say, you should do this on this instrument with this plugin. It's not that. It's how do you hear the way attack and release times affect the groove of stuff. And then if you want to go further, a really good friend of mine, John Paterno, has a company called, I think it's called Mix Therapy. And he does one-on-one mix coaching. So you want to be sort of at a certain level, but he will work with you online. You don't have to be in the same room. And he gives you tasks and you rip apart your own mixes. And everybody I've talked to who's worked with him said it's night and day. Absolute night and day. So maybe we can put a link to that. So Mix Therapy.
We definitely have to. I'll just, for everybody listening, we'll add the link will be there. I mean, it's just fantastic, advice. Thank you for that. Because, it's always like I felt this is even, like for a personal growth, when I just work with somebody who's just mixing, for me, it was always like a little bit, oh, Jesus, it's actually good to know, how the music will be sort of processed. And I always felt like a bit challenged in this realm.
Yeah. And you don't, it's about learning the tools, not about learning like, oh, you should do this, because everything sounds different to everybody. I look at videos that Chad Blake has done. He's one of my favorite mixers. And I watch what he's doing and I think, oh, I'm going to try that. And it never works for me ever because you just hear differently and the source material is different and everything about it is different. So you need to learn the tools to say, if I compress that, I could make it do this thing. And now that's a tool that you've got, as opposed to compress the drums like this. Because then if it's not working for you, you won't have any idea what to do. You won't know how to set the compressor to actually get the thing you want, because the thing that you learned is its specifics instead of the concepts.
Gotcha.
And it's like, when you're younger at school, you're learning facts, right? They teach you stuff. But then by the time you're in university, the idea is you're learning how to learn.
Sort of.
You need to, I mean, in an ideal world, you want to learn how to learn about the stuff. So if you want to learn about compression, you need to know, how can I hear the artifacts and figure out like, oh, I would prefer it did this.
Thank you. That's actually, I mean, but I'll check it out. And I mean, we also obviously recommend to check it out. The Mix Therapy.
Yes.
Andrew, so is there like I know you mentioned multiple times that you like evaluate your workflows like regularly. But is there like any gear that sort of survived the test of time and you are like, you can say that, from the, for decades they're still using and you're still like a big fan of?
For mixing, no, there's nothing. I mean, I'm 100% in the computer and I use headphones and speakers and those have changed a little bit. So, but at the moment, I'm using Odyssey headphones, which I absolutely love. They're not the cheapest things in the world, but it has completely changed my ability to work in headphones, which for mixing in immersive formats is really important. It's just a way of working if you're mixing in stereo. And some people like using headphones, some people don't, some people have to. But for immersive, it has to work in headphones. So I spend a lot of time on that. I've got PMC speakers, which I love. I used older Tannoys for 25 years or something like that. I still love those too. But yeah, it's just, I love faster Mac computers and I love Pro Tools. Like that's what I love. For tracking,
Okay.
There's lots of gear that I absolutely love. I would use a Neve 1073 as the mic pre and EQ on anything I'm recording. There are a couple of microphones I love that, like an SM7, is cheap and it works on almost everything if you need to use it. So there's some tools like that for recording, definitely. But for mixing, it's just, I have a tiny little set of plugins that I use most of the time. And then I've got thousands more plugins that I might use once.
So what are those that are using right now? Can you
I mean, the main one is my channel strip that I got to do with Waves, the Omni channel, because I got to design a channel strip. Are you kidding? That's amazing. So I built exactly what I wanted into one plugin window, and it's all there right in front of me instead of being a collection of 5 or 6 plugins that I used a lot. And I mean, that thing, I think it's 12 or 13 years since it came out, which is incredible to me. And I still use it all day, every day. All day, every day, because it does exactly what I want, and it sounds a way that makes sense. And this is another thing when you're starting out, don't collect plugins. The stock plugins that come with every DAW are good enough to make records. And just, I've been saying over and over, learn your tools, learn a small set of tools, and you can do 99% of everything you need to do using those tools. And then when you need that really special thing, you can go diving through your plugins folder. But otherwise, you're going to waste time. Like, let's say you've got 25 out of the 35 1176 plugins. Are you going to test all 25 on each thing that you want to put an 1176 on to see which is the right one? No. And you better not. So pick one, and like, that's your thing, and that's the one you love, and then that's it. You're done. So
but how about there are just this. To give an example, I mean, for the first year, I was just doing post-production of this podcast by myself. And obviously very often people, using mic, like a computer mic and, like some kind of, I even recorded at home. So it's just obviously not perfect, like a setting. So I just, over time, and also working on the Pro Tools team, I have this privilege that I can work with, yourself and others who come up with some cool tools, so I just figured, while I try not to collect plugins. On the other hand, I can see sometimes there are things that are really improve the workflow so dramatically, recently I got sort of excited with the NoiseWorks, the company, it's DynAssist. So just automate gain and, do some, sibilance, briefing, so it's just it takes so much time sometimes to manually cut when you have episode 2 hours and a half. Yeah. And, you have peaks, and sometimes, I'm a bit stressed when I record. So I just I lose track of the, of the mixer on the side. So there was so much post-production. And then I say, sometimes there are just some cool plugins that are coming.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, you should be checking stuff out, but don't buy 5 things that do the kind of thing you're talking about and then mess with them. You've got one and it works for you, and you probably know it inside out now.
Yeah.
So that's exactly what I'm talking about, though. That's exactly it. So yeah, I was talking, so you're going to mix a rock band. You can do it with the stock plugins, but for something like what you're talking about, absolutely find the right tool, and then you never have to think about it again.
Yeah, that's actually what happened exactly. So I have 2 or 3 tools that I use. I don't do this anymore by myself, but that was actually the 3 plugins, always the same. I know them very well, and check.
Yeah. So when
minutes and it's done.
Sound right, you know what to do. Instead of you've got this thing that you don't really understand what's going on, and it doesn't sound good on this one.
Great.
Yeah,
Andrew, so you mentioned that you mix right now only on laptops. So what was the reason you moved, to just simply, fully in the box?
There were, I mean, two main reasons. One, obviously the workflow part of it, to be able to just stop working on a song and go back to working on something I was working on previously. On the console, you cannot do it
Yeah.
unless you don't change anything on the console, in which case, why are you on a console? So
Mm-hmm.
that was part of it. It meant that I could travel where, you know, I can't take my big Neve console with me. So that was part of it. And the other part was that I was really starting to bang my head up against the limitations of analog gear. There are headroom problems, there's noise, stuff sounds different at different times of day because the power changes, the temperature changes within the gear, everything changes. And I was just sick of it. And it took me a little bit to get used to it because the very, very, very short analog versus digital conversation is that with any piece of analog gear, you get stuff for free. You get harmonic distortion, you get noise, and you get some sort of high pass and low pass filter depending on the circuit design, because that's the way analog gear works. And if you push it, you get clipping as well. So there you go. With digital stuff, unless you're emulating that, you don't. You get exactly what it says you're going to get, which is amazing, but everybody is used to there being this little bit of mess, and it's good. Harmonic distortion is a really good thing. But when you're forced to work only on analog gear, like I was before there was digital gear, you're always fighting it and you're trying to avoid it. There were so many sessions where you're getting drum sounds and you're going to be recording on tape. So the tape machine is on input. So it's just basically a piece of wire. Sounds great. You hit record, you rewind, you play back, you're like, oh, shit. Because it's totally different because it went to tape. So it's not like that stuff is always better. And what I loved once I got my head around it was the amount of control I have over that. I can add all of that stuff whenever I want, but it's not automatically on everything.
Yeah, I was just laughing when I got my Prophet 6, you know, and there is this knob called vintage mode, and you actually, you know, like initiate some kind of, you know, imitates like imitates
and noise and that stuff can be great. I mean, I love that kind of thing, but to be able to actually have control over it is just amazing. So the combination of those two things, and it was terrifying. You know, I'd had this entire huge room full of gear, and my career had gotten much, much better while I was using it. And I thought, well, is this going to work? And it's only about, they say, oh, it's the ears, not the gears, but it's how you hear. And what you're hearing is the thing that doesn't sound like what you want yet. And so you just have a different set of tools to make it sound that way.
Cool. So is there like any hardware that you would love to be, you know, emulated in a digital realm? You know, something that hasn't been done yet, but I mean, you would love to see?
Well, not analog stuff, actually. I was talking to Chad Blake the other day, and there's a box called the SRS, and it was this very specific, like, stereoizing technology. And it was done for one type of piece of gear, and it sort of ended up in this box that was, you were meant to put it on your stereo. Mm-hmm. And if you play a whole song through it, like, it's weird. It just kind of shreds it and makes it wide and whatever. But if you put it on just one element in a mix, which is what he used to do, it's incredible. It's like it's outside the speakers. And that was something that Chad always did that just blew me away. But it's a digital box, and you can't emulate it because, you know, the code is just the code, and you can't get an impulse response of it because it's not ambience. And so there are things like that which are really interesting and almost impossible to do anything about. But I don't know, a piece of analog gear? No.
Okay.
I don't think so.
And are there any other, you know, like a workflow, or I mean, not a workflow, some like a, how to say, I've been trying to ask about the challenges that, you know, Pro Mixer has, you know, in, you know, like other, you know, creating products means that you address certain pains and problems. You know, like you say, being smart about creating stuff, you know, so Is there any other, you mentioned multiple times workflow problems, right? So not having this button here or there, but are there any other, like issues that are, recurring and, that could be a potential, place to
there's
build
stuff
product?
like Bouce Factory, which, if you know what it is, great. And if you don't, it's just something that will automatically bounce all the different versions of mixes that you need. So, but that is very much something you can code, because you can define what it is that you need, and you can define the process it takes to actually make it. There are some things that are just a bit fuzzier and are harder to generalize. Like, there are things where I could probably write a script that would do it, but then again, the way I want to do it changes based on other things. So I think that there is some very exciting avenues you could go down using some AI sort of interpretation, but within the context of something that's actually a process that you do over and over and over. So that's something that I'm excited, and there are lots of people doing it, but like with SoundFlow in ProTools, Christian, they shipped Session Assistant, which is amazing. You just in plain language say, give me tracks for a drum kit. And it's not because someone has put in code what that is. It's just like telling ChatGPT, give me a list of the tracks I would put in a session for a drum kit, but it makes them in Pro Tools and you're ready to record. And that kind of thing is super exciting to me. I think that that's going to just help even more, especially because, it should be able to learn the way you work. It won't just be generalized stuff. So, but specific workflow things, I think I just keep writing them. Like, I always feel like I'm writing Pro Tools features that aren't necessarily what everybody wants, but like, there's no reason for Avid to write these things because a lot of people don't need them. So there's my opportunity to do it for myself. And that is so liberating, because otherwise you just feel like you're beating a head against the wall, And when you can identify something like that and say, you know what, if I spend the next week figuring this thing out, like, there's one I was working on today called the track selector. There are times when you're scrolling through a session that's somebody else's, because I get lots of other people's things to mix. So I get a session, I can't quite figure out all the routing in it and things. And I find an aux and it's called verb 6. Like, okay, what is being sent to verb 6? So in Pro Tools, you can right click on the input to that track and say, select everything that's assigned to that. But that shows that track. It shows things with sends. It shows like a side chain, anything that goes there, it'll select. So I wrote a program that will only select the tracks that have sends to the input of the track that you've selected. It will select every track in a session that has a certain plugin on it. Like, just easy, weird things where I'll stop and say, you know what, other people are going to want to do this, and I don't ever want to do it manually again, ever. So it's that kind of thing, and those I just discover as I run into them.
But again, I'm hearing that these are, all these like challenges are mostly like a workflow related, because all other things are more creative, and these are like so you cannot, they're just subjective, so you cannot just automate them, because this is just the essence, where you're sort of, you cannot just like this is not algorithmic, it's actually based on a specific context. Yeah,
I think you've got the knowable algorithmic stuff, so you can write it just with code. Then you got the sort of fuzzier stuff I was talking about, which would be code, but some smarter thing in the middle of it to help figure out what the context is a little better. And then there's the stuff that, it's just different every time. Now, it doesn't mean that I'm in the middle of something and I won't use anything that does stuff for me. Like Spectral Layers from Steinberg is amazing. And I will be in the middle of a mix and think, I need to separate these things so that I can do the thing I want to do. So I will spend some time letting Spectral Layers do its thing, and then I'll do my little tweaking afterwards. So that's fine. And it's a huge AI process, and I've got no problem with that. But it all came from the thing where I said, I need to split these things up to do something creative. So that stuff you can't anticipate it. So that's mixing, that's writing, that's, producing. It's just moment to moment, making little creative goals for yourself and then trying to realize them, and you move on to the next thing, or you forget about the one you were in the middle of and you start doing something else. But that's the fun part. That's when you're actually doing something. So it's everything else that I want to get rid of.
Gotcha. So you can actually just focus on that. Gotcha. Andrew, I mean, what's your your opinion about about where market is heading? So let me explain why I asked this question. I mean, it's just like a very, how to say, generic question, but I even heard recently Joshua from the audio programmer was saying, okay, so it's just after ADC, okay, it's just the question is what's going on with them, it's like a saturated market, and not AI, and not actually being certain what this technology will do to the industry. But I'm also interested, in how to say, we all, people say innovation, we want more innovation. On the other hand, I mean, I don't see that much innovation nowadays, like a big innovation, right? I mean, like a jump from analog to digital is just I think, some kind of breakthrough, right? But currently, I know maybe AI, but I mean, AI to me is still more a little like alien technology. It's not created by audio people for audio people. There is something that we borrowed, right, from big tech companies, and we sort of just see how we can implement. So I just wonder, what do you think the audio would look like in 20, 30 years? I don't know, immersive, for example. I don't know, some kind of VR entertainment.
I mean, I feel like you'd like there to be this amazing new paradigm, but we were talking about it before with DAWs, that once you start dealing with a large amount of material, it turns out that the tape machine mixer paradigm is really good. It's just obvious. You don't ever have to teach somebody that up is louder. That's like a 1.5 second thing. Okay, now they know it for the rest of their life. And audio routing can be complicated, whatever, but those concepts are really simple. You go left to right with time. You've got waveforms that look like what it sounds like. Okay, cool. You don't need to understand what the hell a waveform is. And you've got up is louder. And so I don't know what sort of innovation there'll be. And I think everything I already said about having smaller tasks and really being able to innovate in there, I think that's great. I think that MPE is really interesting. So for MIDI, because you're finally, there have been crazy MIDI controllers at now every year since 1986, which was the first year I went. And they used to just be crazy, and now they work. They actually do stuff in a way, because the technology for MIDI has finally given them a way to work. And so getting programs to work with that's an innovation, but it's still going to be the paradigm of MIDI tracks with multi-channel information on them. So I don't know that someone's going to come up with this gigantic new concept. I think the innovation is lots and lots and lots of
incremental, smaller things.
I really do think so, because otherwise, if you think about it, the amount of innovation that was happening, and especially that jump from analog to digital, it's huge, but we've now been doing it for a long time. And you discover things have there been any huge innovation in smelting metals? I think it's incremental, technology is always, always, always moving forward. So AI is an innovation because they finally managed to implement stuff that's been theoretical since the 50s and 60s. And now it's okay, it works. And it's really just because it's scaled up to the point where now it does something, as opposed to being like a 2-neuron circuit. So that's great. But even that is basically a technology that's 60 years old in a way, right?
True.
So I don't know. I feel like we've been doing it for a long time. So music would have to move on to have to innovate in how we create music, if that makes sense. I mean, I don't even believe what I just said. I just made that up, and it might be a total crock. But I think the basic tool set we've got is amazing, and it's going to be the small things that just make people think differently within those bigger things. Blah.
Yeah, it's not facts, it's opinions, right? Like you said.
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, I completely agree with you. I mean, my opinion is very similar. So I think there is this trap that everybody is looking for like a huge innovation. And if you look at the musical instruments, you have a piano that is, I don't know when, the modern grand piano sort of came to life. But I mean, it's just like for centuries, it's just more or less the same. Why changing things that actually work, right? And guitars, and you can obviously make a electric guitar and like a double-handed guitar, like a multiple things. But I mean, there's still like a small things, like evolution rather than huge leap, right?
And I think like a really good example of a small thing that can completely change what you're doing is there's a company called Genki, and they make something called the Ring, which I have here somewhere. If I can find it, I'll take it out. Here we go. I think it's here. It better be in here, because otherwise I've lost it. No, I've lost it. It's laying out somewhere. Anyway, it's a ring you put on your finger, and it's Bluetooth, and it does every direction you can move, including taps. And it spits out multiple MIDI controllers, and you map them to anything you want. And then they've got a Eurorack module, and it spits out control voltages. And so that is amazing. And it's like, oh, well, they've had the theremin forever. Yes, they have. And the reissue theremins had MIDI out, and that's fantastic. But this thing on a modular synth lets you stop thinking about how you're going to control 5 parameters at the same time. And you just do it. And you learn this physical way of doing it very, very quickly. And then you rip it apart and you move on. So again, that's a really small thing, but it lets you do things that you couldn't do any other way. So there'll be stuff like that.
I love it. I mean, honestly, I mean, I'm excited because, this is the interface, like a human computer interface. There is something I think a lot. My piano teacher, she's the conductor by education. And so we talk a lot about, like how we could control stuff with gestures. And we never actually came up with anything like a product, but we just like discuss possibilities, what could be, like the future of like a controlling those with, or even like a composing music by, I don't know, dancing or, like a.
Well, there are a lot of people who've done a lot of stuff like that. It's always very personal, but using Max MSP with old like PlayStation cameras, there are a lot of people who've done that, and then that can generate music. I've seen some amazing things where there have been projections on the inside of a church, and you can interact with the projections, which creates music. And so everything is like circularly interacting. And that's amazing. But those are performance pieces. That's not going to be a mainstream thing. But maybe there'll be some bit of it that lets you actually turn it into a small thing that lots of people can use. I mean, think about the evolution in drum pads. They went from just being like, when you hit it, something will happen, to having so much nuance in terms of dynamics. Then there's a thing called the wave drum. And if you find videos of that, it looks a bit like a djembe, kind of, the top of it. And it knows, like, everything changes based on where you hit it completely, and you can mute and all that stuff, but you're triggering whatever sound you want. But of course it gets complicated because you can have this amazing controller, but no sound is set up to actually be controlled in that way. So yeah, it's something where I think people end up making things for themselves because they will go all the way down the rabbit hole. But it's very hard to put that in a box and say, here you go, this will change your life.
Yeah.
But we're also, 150 years into recorded music. And so we've been doing it a long time. And one of the reasons it's hard to innovate is that things have coalesced into the concepts that make sense. So it really takes somebody who's completely out of the box to come up with something new. But look at, sorry, I'm really just rambling on this, but look at orchestral techniques in terms of playing the instruments. Look at all the violin techniques that were never used in the Romantic period. There's probably some people who went home and like, wow, when I play it behind the bridge, that actually sounds really cool. Never, ever, ever did it in public. And then you've got Johnny Greenwood writing pieces where they're playing with a pick. And it's not new, but the music evolves to accommodate the techniques, which evolve to accommodate the music. And that will always happen, I think.
Yeah, but evolution. I mean, yeah. Not just like, I mean, sometimes there can be like a larger, like, groundbreaking innovations, but I mean, yeah, like
it's the perspective too. When AC/DC's Back in Black came out, that was like the heaviest thing I'd ever heard in my life. And now it's a great record, but it doesn't sound that heavy. You know, Meshuggah is a lot heavier than AC/DC. So things just, they move on. But pure innovation is really difficult.
True. Andrew, can I ask you like one last question related, to the tools? So if you were just to, like build your own DAW, what would you I know that you like Pro Tools and you're not planning to do. Yeah. But I mean, this like a DAW thing is, something it's also like working on Pro Tools team. So it's just like I'm super curious what people think, So if you would just like build your own DAW from scratch, I know that you already mentioned things that some things are good and they don't need to change, so timeline and faders. And, there are things that simply like reflect our, how people make music. But, is there like other things that you would?
No, I know Pro Tools so well, and Pro Tools knows me so well. I really do think the way Pro Tools thinks at this point. And I've also been lucky because, like I said, I've been beta testing it for 25 years or something like that. So, or almost 30. And what that means is I've managed over the years to actually have input on features and be able to lobby for things. And no, I can't imagine like what would I want to be fundamentally different. I wouldn't. I find these little baby things, and I mean, but also, what part of that is I think that people underestimate the creative talent it takes to be innovative. They really do. They think like you could just go put some people in a room and you'll come up with a new idea. And that's not true at all. If that were true, Einstein wouldn't have been the first to figure out some things that were fucking crazy. Speed of light's the same no matter how fast you're moving. Like, what? That makes absolutely no sense. And it was like, oh yeah, okay. So, I mean, that's a very specific example, but I think that like, I feel that I am very, very good at iterating on things that have been started. And it's why I think I'm a really good producer and I'm a good mixer, because I react to what I'm given, but I'm always working on the thing that is, especially with the music. I'm not trying to make it my thing. I'm trying to make it the best version of the thing I think it already is, if that makes any sense. And I think with technology, it's exactly the same. It's very difficult to come up with something out of thin air. And I don't write music from scratch because I don't make it out of thin air. And I think technological ideas are that. It's the same thing. There are not that many fantastic songwriters.
True. But, on the other hand, there is no it's, how to say, we are all inspired. We are all standing on shoulders of, our like people before us, right? So it's always, I mean, it sounds like there is something that came from the thin air, but I mean, everybody has inspirations, right? And certain.
Yeah. And I don't necessarily believe you're just channeling the universe. And like, I do think people are coming up with stuff, within themselves, but some people are more creative than others. Some people, like, I accept things a little too easily, which means I don't challenge things as much as maybe I should. And if you're not constantly challenging and saying, well, hold on a second, that doesn't have to be that way, then you don't necessarily take your thought process to something new. And it's not that I get complacent, but like, unless something's really bothering me, like, oh, okay, cool. And I don't really think about it in the same way. So it's not that you have to have this superhuman connection to the ether. And when I say out of thin air, it isn't out of thin air, because as you say, it is a process and it's all built on something else. But it does take a very specific way of challenging things and thinking of things to come up with something that other people have not come up with.
Mm-hmm. You see, I asked about it because I got introduced, to the product development by a Russian engineer who was a student of Genri Schuler. It was like a Russian, I think, patent, it's not an attorney. There was actually some kind of clerk in the patent office that was studying, like a technological patterns. And it's actually crazy because he was trying to sort of make a, scientific theory out of creativity, which is, of its own, like a crazy idea. But one thing that was actually super interesting to me, that he created like a theory of evolution of systems, so he says, since everything just evolves from something else, right? And if we just look at one person, we only see, some kind of great, definitely people can be super creative and courage, sort of like the courageous, but still, if this person is actually placed in certain context, and he also was actually brought up and has certain, education. Absolutely. So the entire like a human culture sort of evolves, and everything that is inside like technology evolves as well. So that was actually very, like a very interesting.
No, I agree. Concept. And I think my phrase, doing it out of thin air was definitely hyperbole. It's not as simple as that. But it's also, I think that there are things that are unknowable to us at the moment. Like, what is consciousness? There are lots of theories, and nobody knows. Nobody knows. People can pretend they know. Nobody knows what it is and what spawns it and what it means. So, like the idea, when I was a little kid, because I don't know, I'm probably really weird, but it occurred to me, like, well, if I had a line, like if I drew a line with a pencil on a piece of paper using a ruler, so it's nice and straight, like there is actually a point that is in the middle. And I could zoom in and zoom in and zoom in and zoom in, and eventually that would be exactly in the middle. But as it turns out, that's not true, because you can't actually locate the stuff that's in the middle, right? Like, you don't know where electrons are. You don't, like, there's stuff that's fuzzy to us, and it's knowable in terms of you can calculate the probability of some stuff. And I know there are problems with my example, but it is the difference between the classic physics and the quantum universe, where you have to live with the idea that stuff is crazy, and is it difficult for people to, I loved Richard Feynman's quote that anyone who says they understand quantum physics doesn't.
Yeah. So,
but is that because we have a lack of perspective? There's a book called Gödel Bach, and it deals with, I think it's probably pronounced Gödel, but his theories of you can't understand everything within an area of math, for instance, without being outside of it, because otherwise you have to take stuff for granted. So you have to have axioms that you just say, well, no, those are true. Don't worry about it. They're true. You would have to zoom out a level to actually be able to prove it. And there's a great book called Flatland, which is about, there is this set of beings that live in 2 dimensions, and they can't conceive of 3 dimensions. It doesn't make any sense to them. They get a sphere that goes through their world, and it's just a circle that keeps getting bigger and smaller. And like, no, you're a circle, you're not a sphere. So it's, I think it's that concept that is demoralizing, and also just so inspirational in a way.
I would say the later one. Definitely, that's what makes us human, right? If everything was just could be calculated and predictable, how boring world would be, right? And that's wow, that's something, that probably that is very hard to ask questions on talk about something else until talking about consciousness. But Andrew, can I just to wrap up, ask you, or maybe so you can tell a little bit about, the Bouce Factory, because you already mentioned a little bit, but also this upcoming, the moment we'll be airing this episode will be already after a December release of ProTools, so there are some sort of enhancements or improvements or stuff that people may actually be able to grab.
Yeah, Bouce Factory, we should put a link to the tutorial videos because I don't want to describe the whole thing. But basically, it will solo and mute tracks. It'll change playlists. It'll change plugin settings. It'll do whatever you need to do between versions of a session that you need to print. And instead of you doing them one by one, you set up a task list. And so I think what's special about Bouce Factory is that it's more than just soloing and muting tracks. And it's very smart about making sure you never overwrite a file. It'll give you conflict file names. It makes sure you have right permissions and folders you can upload to services afterwards. So it's very flexible and powerful in what it does. But what happened with 2510, 6 and 10, when SoundFlow is now in a panel inside of the edit window, is now I've written a version of Bouce Factory that lives inside the edit window. And with the new Pro Tools release, there is a free version of it that will work, and it's just there. And I feel like, I'm actually really, almost honored that Avid decided to do this, because basically I'm saying, you don't need to use that Bouce dialog, use this instead. This is the Bouce dialog for Pro Tools now, because it's based on what you already do, but it's just so much more powerful. So that is for every single Pro Tools user, which is also super exciting, because a lot of the things that Avid bundles in are for certain subscribers and things like that. And they decided that this should just go out to everybody. And it's amazing. It's amazing that I sat in my studio for 2.5 years to build something that's now been out for about 3.5 years. And it's gotten to the point where, in a way, it's an industry standard. That's insane. I'm a guy who mixes records sitting in a room, but it turns out that the stuff that I hate, a lot of other people hate, and I built a tool that makes them hate it less. So yeah, I'm really, really excited that it is built into the edit window and for everybody.
Cool. And we will add, the description to the latest release, Pro Tools release, and the Bouce Factory in the description of the video, so you can guys check it out. Oh gee, that's a nice ending, but I just there's so many other things I would like to ask you about this.
Well, pick one. We'll go out on something else.
All right. So last one. I know that you also have a small label, right?
Yeah.
And you also work with indie musicians, except for a large, not only with the large Grammy, winning, biggest bands. And so, I just wanted to, sort of ask you about your opinion, or how to say that? Obviously there is big labels, and there is a big part of market, which is obviously all the catalogs are owned by the big labels, but there is also this indie market, obviously Bandcamp and others. And, how do you think, this independent artists, sort of market could grow? And, are there any space for just building new, again, I'm just referring to Bandcamp, which is to me some kind of probably a biggest innovator in this realm, right? So created something that helped people who didn't want to, for some reason, go, with majors and, really grow their career independently, because, once again, without just blasting anyone, but so, how this could sort of grow, and what other tools, and, how.
Well, I think that when I started my label, it was for a very specific thing. It was an artist, Low Roar. And I had put something out previously, but then that was why the label existed, basically. And what I learned very, very quickly is that PR and promo, that's the hard part. Making people understand that your product exists is very, very hard. It's gotten much easier now if you're good at social media. If you're not good at social media, it's even harder because other people are good at social media. But the ability to have your fans go directly to you to buy things is great. And it for two reasons. One is that you're selling directly, therefore the profit margins are much better and you have more of a connection with the fans. But also what I found, it's really interesting with Low Roar. I had a store on my label site, Tonequake Records. Then finally we set up a Low Roar website that also had a store. Nobody bought anything from me. Nobody. And I'm in the band. It's not like, and I don't have very many artists. I don't distribute through a major label. I am as small a label as you can possibly be. It is literally me, but I was the man. And people did not want to give me their money to buy something from Low Roar. They wanted to give Low Roar the money directly. As it turns out, because the fact that I'm paying to press all the, it didn't actually matter monetarily, but people felt great about it. And that's why Bandcamp is so great. It's the personal connection. And I feel like it's still really difficult, obviously, to make a living just on your music, but it is easier than it's ever been, just like it's easier to make records than it's ever been. But you've got to be very proactive. And if you're an artist that really does not enjoy promoting themselves, it's going to be almost as hard as it's always been, because nobody's going to know. The number of songs that are released every day, it's some colossal number. It's like 100,000 a day or something stupid like that. And the other thing that the major labels have that indies don't is clout. So to get on the front page of a streaming service, if you say, look, you've got 25 million songs because of me, and we're pushing this album, can we get it on some playlists? They say, yeah, of course. You know, why wouldn't we? It's going to be a big album. You're putting money behind it for other promotion. That's exactly the kind of thing that a music service would want to promote. You're a band that's just made the greatest record in the history of records, and nobody has any idea who you are. It's not going to end up on the front page, and it's not going to get playlisted. So even with indie labels, you start to have aggregators like The Orchard. They distribute tons and tons of indie labels because now they have some clout. But now you somehow have to be important to The Orchard, because otherwise they're not telling anybody about your record. So it is all about making people understand that your album exists. And there are tools to do it, but you've got to really, really work at it. But I think the upside is that you can earn enough that you don't have to have another job if people like your music and you can get in front of them. Whereas that didn't used to be the case. It's just like you didn't used to be able to make an entire record on a laptop.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I hear you. You know, so like a promotion, and I know that a lot of artists actually complain that it's so hard actually to focus on your music and still sort of like be in the social media, because it's so destructive and it's so like
But I think you schedule it, and if there's one person who's good, great, and if not, you hire somebody if you can afford to, because you hope you're hiring somebody who will make you more money that helps pay for them or pays for them completely. You obviously don't want to be losing money because you hired someone to do social media for you. But the other thing, like I found talking to a lot of musicians, is that one of the great things about lockdown is it broke the cycle of you've just finished recording music and you're releasing it. Now you've got to go play shows. And so it means that all of your creative time is now spent touring. But now there are bands who have not bothered going back out on the road because they found ways to promote using social media or private concerts or things like that, you know, private streams.
Oh, yeah.
And they no longer lose the time. So it's like I know bands from Norway who love the winter because it's never light and they just stay home and write music the whole time. Whereas I think I would lose my mind if the sun never came up. I mean, England's bad enough. It's dark at 4:00 in the afternoon.
Yeah.
But they actually love it. It's a nurturing thing. And I think it's this being able to block out the rest of the world and be creative. So even if you have to do that on an hour by hour basis instead of a 3-month by 3-month basis, you're not allowed to complain about the fact that you can't make a living doing music if you refuse to do the stuff that makes money. You can't just make a record and hope that people understand it's there and then they shower you with money. But it's also why it's great that some countries have living wage for musicians, for artists, because then you can afford to eat, to create. And some countries are much better at that than other countries.
Which are the best?
I believe the Scandinavian countries are pretty good at it. You have to prove that you are an artist and you're actually doing stuff. You can't just say, I like to draw, give me some money. But if you can do it, and it's why there is so much music coming out of Scandinavia. I think that's part of it, because people who are into it can actually concentrate on it instead of it having to be a night and weekend thing.
Great. So, listen, I mean, that's a nice point. My idea for, staying creative is actually to making private concerts and, even creating some kind of small space where I can feel safe. I honestly am maybe not too lazy, but I mean, traveling abroad, it's, so tiring, etc. And I never wanted actually to be like a big star, so I say, but I want to simply be creative and to do something. So, when you mentioned that it's actually it's not like a small, idea in my head, but it's just like some kind of...
It's big. You build like a local collective. You find one other set of musicians who want to do a show with you. And then that turns into a weekly hang. It's like the salon evenings they had in Paris in the 1700s. And, people come hang out. And even if it doesn't turn into anything bigger, it will make you love doing what you're doing so much more.
That's exactly my point, so I don't have to work myself into exhaustion, but I mean, simply be creative, right? And sort of hang around with people who are simply who love the same thing.
Yeah. And I'm a bad one to talk because I never leave my house, but
you too?
For other people, I think it's a very good idea.
Yeah, no, that's me too, exactly the same thing.
Great.
Andrew, thank you very much again. It was just, so cool to talk to you. And, and again, there's so many questions, but we have to sort of, for the sake of time, finish. I know we agreed, we'll actually do the show, a bit shorter show when we talk already for almost 1 hour and a half. And to the listeners, check out, the Bouce Factory in 2025.12, so, what else can I say? See you probably around, right? I mean,
yeah. I'm not going anywhere. Like I said, I never leave the house, so I'm always here.
Thank you, Andrew.
All right. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to this episode. I hope you liked it. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and of course on our YouTube channel. Make sure to subscribe to it and hit the bell, because we publish a lot of interesting videos there, not just the episodes. You can also become a supporter and get premium content like additional reading, unpublished videos on our Buy Me a Coffee page, linked in the description of this episode. See you in the next one. Yo.